"I'll go first," added the governess, "and the moment you see I've cleared the wall you must jump after me. Only do not keep me waiting." The girl stood for a moment in silence, arranging her wings. Her fingers were trembling a little. Suddenly she drew the boy to her and kissed him passionately. "Be brave," she whispered, looking searchingly into his eyes, "and strike hard. You can't possibly fail." In another minute she was climbing out of the window. For 1 second he saw her standing on the narrow ledge with black space at her feet. The next, without even a cry, she sprang out into the darkness and was gone. Jimbo caught his breath and ran to see. She dropped like a stone, turning over sideways in the air, and then at once her wings opened on both sides and she righted. The darkness swallowed her up for a moment, so that he could not see clearly, and only heard the threshing of the huge feathers, but it was easy to tell from the sound that she was rising. Then suddenly a black form cleared the wall and rose swiftly in a magnificent sweep into the sky, and he saw her outlined darkly against the stars above the high elm trees. She was safe. Now it was his turn. "Act quickly, don't think," rang in his ears. If only he could do it all as quickly as she had done it. But insidious fear had been working all the time below the surface, and his refusal to recognize it could not prevent it weakening his muscles and checking his power of decision. Fortunately, something of his older self came to the rescue. The emotions of fear, excitement, and intense anticipation combined to call up the power of his deeper being. The boy trembled horribly, but the old experienced part of him sang with joy. Cautiously he began to climb out onto the window sill. First one foot and then the other hung over the ledge. He sat there, staring down into the black space beneath. For a minute he hesitated. Despair rushed over him in a wave. He could never take that awful jump into emptiness and darkness. It was impossible. Better be a prisoner for ever than to risk so fearful a plunge. He felt cold, weak, frightened, and made a half movement back into the room. The wings caught somehow between his legs and nearly flung him headlong into the yard. "Jimbo, I'm waiting for you," came at that moment in a faint cry from the stars, and the sound gave him just the impetus he needed before it was too late. He could not disappoint her, his faithful friend. Such a thing was impossible. He stood upright on the ledge, his hands clutching the window sash behind, balancing as best he could. He clenched his fists, drew a deep, long breath, and jumped upwards and forwards into the air. Up rushed the darkness with a shriek. The air whistled in his ears. He dropped at fearful speed into nothingness. At first everything was forgotten. Wings, instructions, warnings and all. He even forgot to open his wings at all, and in another second he would have dashed upon the hard paving stones of the courtyard, where his great enemy lay waiting to seize him. But just in the nick of time he remembered, and the long hours of practice bore fruit. Out flew the great red wings in a tremendous sweep on both sides of him, and he began to strike with every atom of strength he possessed. He had dropped to within 6 feet of the ground, but at once the strokes began to tell, and, oh, magical sensation, he felt himself rising easily, lightly, swiftly. A very slight effort of those big wings would have been sufficient to lift him out of danger, but in his terror and excitement he had quite miscalculated their power, and in a single moment he was far out of reach of the dangerous yard and anything it contained. But the mad rush of it all made his head swim. He felt dizzy and confused, and instead of clearing the wall he landed on the top of it and clung to the crumbling coping with his hands and feet, panting and breathless. The dizziness was only momentary, however. In less than a minute he was on his feet and in the act of taking his second leap into space. This time it came more easily. He dropped, and the field swung up to meet him. Soon the powerful strokes of his wings drove him at great speed upwards, and he bounded ever higher towards the stars. Overhead the governess hovered like an immense bird, and as he rose up he caught the sound of her wings beating the air, while far beneath him he heard with a shudder a voice like the rushing of a great river. It made him increase his pace, and in another minute he found himself among the little whirlwinds that raced about from the beating of Miss Lake's great wings. "Well done!" cried the delighted governess. "Safe at last! Now we can fly to our heart's content." Jimbo flew up alongside, and together they dashed forward into the night. End of chapter 10.